In July of 2018, two people set out on a hike through the Big Cypress National Preserve in southern Florida. The heat in the middle of summer was unbearable, so it was no surprise that after about 10 miles of hiking, they stopped to rest at a luxury campground. When they entered the campsite, they noticed a yellow tent and a pair of boots standing next to it. Something struck them as strange, so instead of thinking it was just another camper taking a break, they decided to look inside the tent to see what was going on. What they saw shook them to the core. When they pulled back the yellow awning, they saw the lifeless body of a pale and thin tourist lying in his tent. It turned out that the two hikers had just made a discovery that would spawn a mystery that would baffle the travel community, the media, and the authorities for years to come. After all, no one knew who the man was. All they knew was his nickname, mostly Harmless. And even when the man was identified several years later, no reason was given for his death. In April of 2017, a man set out on a hike south along the Appalachian Trail north of New York City. Within days, he began to call the trail mostly Harmless, allegedly naming it one night around a campfire. The origin of the name is unknown, but it may have been a reference to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The man had no cell phone, no credit card, no ID. He had no technology. In the old days, this would have been quite normal, but it was 2017. He usually told travelers he met that he used to work in the technology industry and was trying to take a break from his digital life, and it seemed to be working. He traveled south along the Appalachian Trail and seems to have made many friends along the way. Sometimes he could be seen in photographs taken by other travelers. He was described as a really nice person and also as a very hardy hiker. But despite the fact that he communicated with other people, he never revealed his real name to anyone. When he had no choice but to give his real name, for example, when checking into a hotel, he used the name Ben Billamy, which, as it turned out, was also fictitious. On December 1st, 2017, he walked into a Mountain Crossings store in northern Georgia. Mountain Crossings is a store located just 30 miles from the southern terminus of the Appalachian Trail. He told the store employee that he was looking for a route from the southern end of the Appalachian Trail to the Florida Keys, making it clear that he was not going to finish the Appalachian Trail, even though he had already hiked about 1,000 miles by then. The employee sold him some maps and took his picture for the store's Facebook page. In accordance with his plan to travel south, mostly Harmless set out on the Pinhote Trail, a 335-mile trail that runs through northwest Georgia and Alabama. He was photographed at least once while traveling the Pinhote Trail, and eventually either completed it or got off it at some point to continue his journey south to Florida. On January 24th, 2018, a woman named Kelly Fairbanks, who often helped hikers on the Florida Trail, met him while walking along Highway 90 as he walked in the middle of the road. Fairbanks later described him as a nice man with kind eyes. Fairbanks was a real angel of the Florida Trail because she helped travelers in every way possible. She gave them food, a place to sleep, a ride to town, and much more. That's why she had talked to most of the travelers over the years. She knew what a prepared traveler looked like, and she immediately realized that mostly Harmless was very unprepared for the trip. She learned that he had no cell phone or GPS and was relying on a paper map to navigate. But the map was not very detailed. It was missing many important things that he would need to follow the trail. In addition, Fairbanks noticed that he was making a number of typical first-time hiker mistakes when it came to choosing his gear. This made Fairbanks recall her encounter with the man, and she even took a photo of him, which would later play a rather important role in his case. About a month later, two hikers from Florida met mostly Harmless on a flooded section of the trail in the Ocala Wildlife Management Area. They remembered meeting him because he told them again that he didn't have a cell phone, GPS, or even a modern map, which prompted them to share information about the trail with him. They told him much more details than usual, trying to make his life easier. About 2 days later, the woman met the hiker at the Sand Pond Campground in Pine Log State Forest. During the conversation, mostly Harmless told the woman that he used to work in technology and, oddly enough, had some health issues, so he wanted to hike the trail before he was physically unable to do so. This was the only time he hinted at possible health problems. On March 17th, another hiker spoke briefly with mostly Harmless near Paisley, Florida, exchanging trail names and basic pleasantries. Finally, on April 15th, 2018, Trail Angel Mike met mostly Harmless on the side of the road a few miles north of Noble's camp. He was probably the last person to see him alive. A few months later, on July 23rd, the two hikers set out on the Florida Trail to the vast Cypress National Preserve. They had to overcome swamps, oppressive heat, and alligator territory before they reached Camp Nobles, where they planned to take a break. It turned out to be an unforgettable break for them. When they arrived at the campsite, they saw a yellow tent with a pair of boots next to it. There was also a very strong, unpleasant odor. The whole situation seemed strange and disturbing to them. They called out to the person they thought was in the tent, but no one answered. Then they decided to look inside, and what they saw terrified them. When they looked inside, they saw the body of an extremely thin man lying there, looking right at them. The tourists immediately called the 911 rescue service, and an investigation was launched. At the scene, detectives began searching, but unfortunately they found no passport, cell phone, credit card, or any other documents on the man that could help identify him. They were unable to match the man's fingerprints or DNA to any of the existing databases. This indicated that the man had no connection to the outside world, and no less surprisingly, it proved to be very difficult to find out exactly how he died. There were no signs of a violent death in the campsite. At the time of discovery, the man weighed only 83 pounds, standing 5 feet 8 inches tall. This indicated that he probably died of starvation, as his body was emaciated. 83 pounds at that height is very small. Perhaps he was lost or physically incapacitated and simply ran out of food. This theory seemed logical, but it was disproved when investigators found food in his tent. In addition, he had more than $3,000 in cash on him. Eventually, an autopsy was performed, but the cause of death could not be determined. Investigators had no leads and realized that they would not be able to solve the case until they identified the deceased. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement created a sketch of the man based on his appearance. They also published images of his tent, hiking poles, and boots, and suggested that he was between 35 and 50 years old. The photo of the man quickly spread on the internet, especially among tourist groups. And soon, Kelly Fairbanks, the same woman who had stopped to talk to him on Highway 90 about 6 months earlier, recognized him in a photo posted on Facebook. She contacted the police and also posted the man's photo online. Soon, dozens of other people came forward reporting that they had also met the man, perhaps even hiking or vacationing with him. Thanks to eyewitness accounts and the examination of his personal belongings, investigators were able to establish the first signs of identification. His pseudonym, Mostly Harmless, was the best known. Despite numerous photographs of his face, equipment, and stories from people who met him on the trail, no one was able to identify Mostly Harmless by his real name. Investigators knew his travel route, future plans, career, and place of birth. However, his real name remained a mystery. The lack of progress in the investigation forced law enforcement to declare a dead end at the end of 2018. No new clues were found throughout the year. Meanwhile, a group of enthusiasts who had been researching the Mostly Harmless case on Facebook did not give up. Their efforts proved fruitful. It turned out that the traveler was carrying a notebook filled with ideas for Screeps, an online strategy game for programmers. A group focused on digital forensics reviewed the accounts of all potential Screeps users active before April 17, 2017, the date that Mostly Harmless gave to other tourists as the start of his journey. They were able to establish that Mostly Harmless had an account under the name Vajor. A woman named Sahar Bigdeli organized a study of the tourists' teeth with one of the country's leading isotope analysts. Her hope was to find clues to the whereabouts of Mostly Harmless. The genomics company Othram took a DNA sample from the hiker and began conducting advanced genetic analysis to identify him. Collier County provided them with a bone fragment from which they extracted DNA. Next, Othram began searching for genetic similarities between people in their database to create a tree of potential relatives. The study showed that the tourist had Cajun roots. His family came from Assumption Parish, Louisiana, and some family members bore the surname Rodriguez. In mid-December, the photos of Mostly Harmless reached a group of friends in Baton Rouge. One of them called the Collier Parish Sheriff's Office. This friend, as it turned out, knew who the tourist was. His name was Vance John Rodriguez, born in February of 1976 near Baton Rouge. He had a twin sister and an older brother. Over the years, he told friends that his father had caused him deep emotional trauma, but no one he talked to understood exactly what had happened. According to his friends, at about 15 years old, Rodriguez went into a field with a gun, planning to commit suicide. He shot himself in the stomach, but as he lay bleeding to death, he changed his mind and decided to live. He weakly raised his hand and was noticed by a passing truck driver who stopped to help. Later, Rodriguez told his friends that he would like to be buried in that field. At the age of 17, Rodriguez was emancipated by a Lafayette, Louisiana court with the consent of his parents. Marie, who lived with him as a friend for several years when he was 20, recalls that he was angry that his parents had sent him to an orphanage after a suicide attempt. He didn't say anything about his parents except to swear, Marie recalls. She later said that after Rodriguez's death, she wrote to his parents and sister, to which his sister replied, "My family will not comment on this situation." In 2013, Rodriguez moved to New York City. He met a woman whose name, unfortunately, is unknown. They loved to travel together, but later their relationship deteriorated. According to his friends, Rodriguez became aggressive towards his partner and others. He decided to travel alone to try to reboot and possibly become a different person. According to friends who saw photos of him on the trail, he looked healthier than ever. He was smiling and friendly to others. However, the people on the trail did not know him well enough to see his ups and downs. Perhaps he really knew how to hide his true emotions and the side of his personality that he did not want to show. Traveling the Appalachian Trail, Wayne Rodriguez had no obligations. No one was looking for him. His family did not get in touch. His ex-girlfriend was afraid of him. And his friends in Louisiana just thought he had fallen into a long depression. He cut all ties and started traveling. The chronology of his last few months is unknown, but it is likely that he was stranded and starving, possibly at the same campsite where he was found on July 23, 2018. When two hikers came across his tent, his body weighed only 83 pounds. However, he had money on him and was only a few miles from a major highway. He was alone in a huge, unfamiliar city. He had ruined his relationship. Angry, he left his home. And then, overcoming the mountains, stepping over roots and rocks, he tamed his demons. Many people who met him did not recognize him as the dark, brooding, sometimes dangerous person he was at home. Perhaps he had become someone else, and perhaps that was what he wanted. Subsequently, after all the DNA tests, the authorities confirmed with 100% certainty that the man found in the tent on the trail in Florida was indeed Vance Rodriguez, and at that moment, the media declared the case solved. But was it really solved? The man's identity had been confirmed, and that was undoubtedly an important piece of the puzzle. However, many questions remained about what happened to him, the most important of which was how and why he died. There were several versions, and the first was the accident theory. The investigation was sure that he did not die as a result of violence. After all, they found more than $3,000 in cash on his person, so robbery was clearly not the cause of death. A drug overdose was also most likely not the cause of death. The only two substances found in his system were ibuprofen and an antihistamine, both commonly taken by tourists. There were also no signs of alcohol consumption in excessive amounts. The most likely cause of death was starvation, because, as mentioned, he weighed only 83 pounds when his body was found. However, it is important to note that food was found in his tent, and he had it with him. In addition, he was only 5 miles from the main highway, where he could have hitchhiked or gotten into town to get more food if he really needed it. None of this makes sense, and it is still unclear what happened to Rodriguez. The only other version of events is suicide. However, it is hard to imagine that he would first starve himself to death, and then take his own life, without the investigation finding any trace of it. There is also no evidence to support this theory. The only thing that hints at it is a suicide attempt at the age of 15 with a firearm. But this is far from sufficient evidence to definitively determine that he committed suicide at a more mature age. There were no signs that he avoided people on the trail. In addition, no personal photos of him were found, except for those where he was with someone. He had many friends. He communicated with dozens of people. Therefore, the version that he was a reclusive hermit with a suicidal tendency can be immediately rejected. His story was covered by many media outlets, including such well-known ones as the New York Post, Wired magazine, and Fox News. It would seem that such an event could not go unnoticed, but why did no one report his disappearance? Eventually, it turned out that Rodriguez had become estranged from his friends and family in Louisiana, so they would not have looked for him. Some of his ex-girlfriends did report that he was violent and they were afraid of him, so they didn't want to maintain a relationship with him and didn't look for him when he disappeared. All in all, it seems that he really did not have regular contact with anyone at home or with anyone in his personal life outside of the trail. This story remains one of the most mysterious and strange events to happen to hikers on this trail. A hiker with no ID, phone, or wallet was found exhausted in a tent just a few miles off the highway. Though he had food and cash on him, there were no signs of foul play, and the cause of his death remained unsolved. Rodriguez's story emphasizes the importance of human connection and how easy it is to get lost in a vast world, going unnoticed even by those closest to you. That's all for today. Share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think could have caused the tourist's death? Don't forget to like the video if you liked it, and see you in the next videos. Bye.